Thanks for attending, everyone. So this is our presentation of transcoding in the cloud and creating high-quality IMFs using the Pixelstrings platform. So I will go ahead and get started. So my name is Mark Leonard. I am one of the Pixelstrings developers as part of the Cinnafilm team. So just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be going over today, we're going to be going over what Pixelstrings is and sort of how it functions, as well as how the web interface actually works. Then we're going to be talking about creating workflows and specifically creating IMF workflows and what our basic IMF workflow entails. Then we are going to send through an IMF job, and I'll show you what those output files will look like from beginning to end. And then after that, I'll be taking questions. So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to just put them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar little modal, and I will get to those at the end. All right, so this is the actual Pixelstrings platform. This is a web-based service. Everything is done within your browser. There's nothing to install. You just navigate to the URL, register, log in, and this is basically what it's going to look like. So as you can see here, these are all of the different assets that I have currently within my cloud storage. Pixelstrings is a bring your own storage platform. So basically, if you have an S3 bucket with all of your assets, you will connect it to the Pixelstrings platform, and this will list out all of those assets. So obviously this has already been connected to my storage. So I'll just go over to settings to just kind of show you what that would look like for a new user. So the settings tab is in the upper right-hand corner. And if you scroll down, you can see that there are two storage locations. So here is the import location. So all of those assets that you saw listed in the assets tab comes from these credentials. So I have a bucket called Mark's Test Bucket, and those are all of my assets that are within that. And then your export location is where all of your files that you've sent through Pixelstrings end up. So in this case, I have it pointed to a different bucket, but you can put it to the exact same bucket if you'd like. That works as well. We also have an export folder location here, so that can be really helpful if you are indeed using the same bucket, say for your import and export locations. You can put everything into that folder and to separate things out. So once you've entered all of these different credentials, then you just click Save and navigate back over to the Assets page, and all of your assets will show up. So you can see here that we've also gathered some metadata about each clip that we have in our bucket. And the reason that we do that is because we want to be able to provide on-demand pricing for any given workflow. So the way that Pixelstrings works is it's a resolution and per runtime minute based cost. So let me just go over to our little cost sheet here. So you can see here, depending on what your input and your output resolutions are, then you're provided with a per minute cost. And again, this is per media runtime minutes, not the actual length of the entire process itself. So if you have a 1 minute clip and you're going, say, HD to HD, it's going to cost you $1.99 a minute, and going up from there. So to just go back over to Pixelstrings itself, you can see here that this is a 53-second clip. So for this workflow going to HD, it's going to cost you $1.99. This clip down here, you can see it's 1 minute and 28 seconds. So I will select a workflow, and there you go. It's charges you for 2 minutes. It rounds up to the next minute, so it charges you 2 minutes of runtime. And that's basically how the pricing works. So I'll just go ahead and send these through with this given workflow to just kind of show you how the process works. So I'll just click Finalize Jobs, and it gives you a rundown of all of the different clips that you've selected. You can select any file naming options that you need to, and it'll tell you where it's going. So this is that bucket that I showed you in the settings, and the total job cost is going to be $6.97. So I'll just go ahead and submit that. And those jobs are going. All right, so I'm going to head So from here, I will now show you how you create these workflows. I just kind of showed you that there's a list of them here, but you're going to want to create some custom ones on your own. So you can see up here that we have a workflows tab. I'll just click that. I will select one of the workflows that's already here, just sort of as a starting point for you. So you can see here that I selected an XAVC workflow. Within the description, we're going to remove the telecine, denoise it, and we're going to send it out as a 25p output. So first I'll cover convert fix. For anyone that's familiar with any of the Cinnafilm products, convert fix is the same as Tachyon. So if you've ever used Tachyon before, these settings are all exactly the same. So this does things like deinterlace, standards conversions, telecine removal, anything that needs motion compensation and things like that. So all of your temporal conversion settings are done within this convert fix module. So in this case, I chose the allow telecine pull down removal option. Basically what this does is if Tachyon sees a pattern, it will remove that pattern before doing any further conversions. I also have motion compensation on. This is handy if it encounters any other types of, if the conversion that it's specified to do needs motion compensation to create any frames in between existing frames. But turning on motion compensation will make sure that that happens. And that's all I'm going to do for this specific conversion. I'm going to be going to 25p, so that's all I need to do. So I can move on here to optimize texture. Optimize texture is the equivalent of dark energy. Again, similar situation as Tachyon. If you've used any of the Cinnafilm products, these are equivalent here. And you can see here that I just have automatic denoise and read texture applied. So it's going to do a spatial denoise and regrain of each frame. We also have a few other options here to note, like chroma noise removal and dust bust. So those are also just a few other features that are within this optimized texture module. I won't be using them for this conversion. And you've probably seen me kind of clicking around on all of these different question marks. So just note that if you have a question about what any of the settings do, we have these little tooltips to help you determine if it's good for the conversion you're trying to do or not. All right, next tab over is broadcast compliance. So this will do gamut legalization and things of that nature. So if you need any sort of legalization done to your clips before you're sending it out to whoever you're delivering it to, that's where you can apply all these settings. We also have a handful of presets here, so this will kind of get you on the right track if there's a specific preset that you or a certain legalization compliance setting that you need created. Those presets will get you there. Okay, and on to output. So as I said here, you can see that this is an XAVC 4K output that I selected. And so if you went ahead with this preset here, then you would get an MXF wrapped XAVC file at 300 megabits. For XAVC, we have a handful of other presets here, 480, CBG, and VBR both. As far as some of the other standard codecs that we support XDCAM, and as far as MOVs, we have DNX HD. We have a few other codecs that are almost ready for production, so this will be populated further shortly. So this, as I started out here, this webinar is based around IMF. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this workflow here and I'm going to kind of turn it into an IMF workflow. So, so I'll go ahead and under the output type at the top, I'm going to click IMF. And you can see here that I'm going to keep this at 25 frames a second at HD resolution. So I'm going to save this preset now and proceed creating this IMF. Let me just rename it. Go IMF 25p HD. Save that. All right. So now I will go back over to assets. So the asset that I'm going to be creating an IMF out of is this one right here. And as you can see, this is a 1920 by 1080 29p asset, and we're going to be converting this to 25p. Now, before I get started, there's a few other things that I want to cover here. So let me go back over to my slides. So when you create an IMP with Pixelstrings, there's a few things to note. First and foremost, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a simple route to creating IMFs and IMPs with your existing mezzanine assets, because there's a possibility that you have a library of all of your mezzanine assets, but some of your clients who you may be delivering to are transitioning to IMF or asking for IMF or whatever the case may be. So this is basically an idea to basically the idea behind this is to be able to flip those assets to IMF in a simple sort of way. So currently for our basic IMP, what we need one stream of 1080p video. We need stereo or 5.1 audio within that file, as well as one embedded data track, so like a closed caption track. And if you pass, within one file, if you pass those things in, then we will be able to create an IMF for you. So let me head back over to Pixelstrings. And you can see here that when we create the IMF workflow, the cost is $2.49. So for every minute of IMF material that we're going to be creating, it's an additional 50 cents. So 1 minute is $2.49. And sort of the way that this flows is once we have done the proper encoding of all the different files, then we pass that off to CineCert, who we've partnered with. Let me pop back over to my slide here. You can see it says Pixelstrings and CineCert. Once we encode all the files, we pass it to CineCert. CineCert will do its wrapping of the IMP itself and then pass it back to us to deliver it to you. All right, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and now send this through. So I will click Finalize Jobs. And the last step when you are submitting an IMF is there's some metadata that needs to go with that specific IMF that gets that CineCert will then take and flip into the wrapping that it does. So let me drop down this file. So I'm just going to kind of enter all of these different pieces of metadata really quickly. Pixelstrings.com. I'll just put in an arbitrary label. Okay, and obviously this you would fill out specific to whatever asset that you are delivering. So this will do in this case. Again, final job cost $2.49, and I'll submit the job. Okay, and you can see here that our other jobs are still going. One is actually done, and now we are kicking off our IMF job here. So I'll just kind of show you around a couple other places in the interface here, and we can just kind of check back on this as this file progresses. So we've sent through a handful of jobs, as you can see here. So the next logical place that I can go is the Statements tab. So let me head over there. All right, so the Statement tab is basically a ledger of all of the different conversions that you've done and how your balance is affected from there. You can see that your most recent balance is the topmost line, and that will correspond. Oh, well, if I refresh the page, sorry, this will be adjusted. But yeah, there's two places you can access your balance, basically. One of which is the top, and one of which is in your statement page. So let me just refresh this really quickly. There we go. So now your statement is updated, or your balance rather. There are two ways at which you can purchase more credits on the platform. One of which is right here in the statements page. So if I wanted to enter, do $10, I can buy $10 worth of credits. All of our payment processing is done through Stripe when you use this. So we don't store any of your credit card data or anything along any of that. It all gets passed through Stripe, which is a secure, trusted process, and then that gets added to the ledger. And then the second way that you can do it is to just send us a PO, and we can then apply that balance to your credit here. All right, and then the last tab that I will point out is the support tab. So here we have a few resources of how to get started as far as creating a bucket and the proper IAM roles and everything along those lines. And so hopefully this is enough to get you started. All right, so let me just check back in on our job here. Okay, you can see that it's now ingesting the asset. And then from there, it will do the image processing. Then it will do the IMF wrapping. And then it will pass it back to us to deliver the final files. Now, I'll just kind of fast forward here to show you what this final IMP will look like once it lands back in your cloud storage. All right, so actually if I refresh this, you can see some of those other files that I just sent through. In this case, you can see right here, it says IMP with the date. So this is the IMP that, this is what the IMP will look like. So I'll just go into this folder. And these are all of your different assets. So here is your CPL, your video stream, J2C, your audio stream, PCM, your PKL, and your TT, which is the time text. So this would be your caption data here. And then lastly, your asset map. So this is what your final IMP deliverable will look like. And so from here, you can push this out to wherever you need to. All right. So that's all I have. So from here, I will take any questions that you have. Again, if you can just put them into the questions box within the GoToWebinar modal, and I will answer them now. Let me pull that up so I can see all of them. Okay, so we have a few questions coming in. Are there, okay, so are the R128 and Callmax limiting support? Who's asking? I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure. Okay, it looks like Brian is asking that question. I'm not exactly sure what that question is. Sorry. I would say maybe if you want to describe your question a little bit further, I may be able to answer it. And if it's easier to send that in an email to me, that's totally fine. You can see my email is up on the screen here, mark@cinnafilm.com. So yeah, sorry about that, but I'd love to answer that question for you. Okay. So let's see if anybody else has any questions here. Okay, good question. Watermarking support. Yeah, we have talked a lot about adding some sort of watermarking support. I don't necessarily have a timeline for you, but if you have any specs as to how you'd like to implement something like that, feel free to shoot us an email and we can work through it and see what we can come up with. We're always happy to take suggestions of what might be helpful to people. So feel free to send me an email about that. Okay, next question. IMF includes does the IMF include only include one language per file, I believe is what the question is, or more than one? For now, just one, unless you're, so like typically a stereo pair or a 5.1 audio stream would just be one, would be like one language. But we're going to be adding other audio supports for other different audio configurations. So that is coming in the future. And then the other thing that might be asking about is closed captions. So again, right now we're only supporting one stream of captions. You could say your audio was in English and you wanted your closed caption in Spanish. You could do that, and that would still abide by the specs of what a basic IMP is. But again, we'll be adding more features like that in the future for sure. Okay. Next question. Is there a test environment to set up profiles without being charged until you're ready to go live? Yeah, that's a great question. Let me show you one more feature within Pixelstrings. Okay, so if you go to the assets page here and say you select a file and you know that you want to use this workflow, down here we have a button called Finalize Tests rather than Finalize Jobs. So what does that do? So there's two things that this will do. One is that you can actually send through a small chunk of a file. This is a very short clip, so it's not as applicable. But say you had an hour-long program, you can send through, the first 2 minutes of it or whatever, and you will only be charged for those first 2 minutes. And so The two major features is one, it'll allow you to select a range, and two, we'll actually give you a 50% off discount because what we'll do is we will watermark the output. It's a very light watermark. It'll still allow you to judge very clearly the image quality of the final, what the final output file will look like. So so basically, you know, what we recommend to people is to maybe set up like a small test suite and send through, excuse me, all of your different files, send through that test suite of files to test out all of your different workflows. And you'll maybe, you know, spend like $5 or $6 kind of figuring things out. And then quickly once you have confidence in those workflows, then you'll be able to send your other assets through. So that is, that's how we're attacking that. Great question. Okay, the next question is, where do you add the closed caption file? And that's for IMF, I'm sure. So the caption file has to be embedded in the asset itself. So like this, the asset that I used as an example, this one, this 608-708, this has a video stream, 2 audio channels, and then it has a caption stream embedded in it. So that is, so then that gets processed since it's embedded within the file. All right, next question. Have you added support for 444 Chroma format? Not yet. Some of their codecs that are almost out of development will include 444, but for now we just have 422 formats. Good question. All right, next question. Yes, great question. Is the ability to build an IMF using separate sources on your roadmap? Absolutely. That's going to be very high on the list. Again, we wanted to get this out to be as helpful as possible as soon as possible. So that's why we're right now working with just sort of the one asset to IMF setup. But yes, we will be we'll be adding support to combine different assets into an IMF shortly. Great question. Okay, let's see if there's any more. Okay, here's the next question. Netflix updates their specs periodically. Do you update for those specs automatically? Yeah, we're actively working on keeping up with the Netflix spec. Eventually, what we're going to be adding pretty shortly is we're going to actually include the Netflix Photon verify step, so that basically, okay, let me back up actually for those of you who don't know. When you deliver an IMF to Netflix, they run it through a program called Photon. And what that does is that basically verifies the integrity of the IMF against their spec. So we're going to be, and it's an open source tool, so we're going to be adding that into the back of ours so that you know that it will pass the Photon spec, which complies with the Netflix IMF spec. So great question. Beyond Photon, are there any QC options on the horizon? Yes, there are. I can't really say much because we're still road mapping everything, but yeah, we're constantly talking about adding different QC options, especially because it's just like we need a good way for you to be able to view your assets in the cloud. We fully recognize that. So we're going to be adding a few different both automatic and visual QC things in the future. Great question. Okay, any other questions? All right, here we go. Is there a manual available to list all the various settings for Tachyon and DE rather than the rollover in the interface? Yeah, that's a great question. I believe we do. There is not currently within this Pixelstrings website, I will say, but I believe we do have a manual. So that's a fair question. Feel free to email me about that and I can pass it on to you and we'll work on getting that into the web interface as well. Good question. Okay, I don't see any more questions, but let me look back through to make sure I didn't miss any and feel free to add any other questions. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. I do not see any more questions. So if you do think of something, again, feel free to email me. My email is mark with a C at Cinnafilm cinnafilm.com. You can also contact us via support@cinnafilm.com. Any of that will work. We have some forms on all of our websites, so whatever's easiest for you. And with that, I'll say thank you, and I hope to hear from some of you soon.